It's the 29th of July, 2026, and we've got major events rippling across the Middle East right now. Just yesterday evening, around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, an A-10C Thunderbolt II appeared on CENTCOM's X page as a response to Iraqi proxy militias that are owned by Iran. So US Central Command put it at the top of an announcement, a picture of that beautiful A-10C, and now it looks like it was hitting these targets, or at least some fighter jets were. It's not confirmed it was the A-10, but when CENTCOM posts an image like that, you might get a little burnt on these proxies. So showing the Warthog is a direct message. And here is the sequence. Here's all that went down. The A-10 Warthog, incredibly capable. Remember, even depleted uranium rounds can be loaded in that thing, and it can absolutely decimate the enemy. But all this happened within 6 hours. So at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps forces launched multiple ballistic missiles out of Iran at United States forces in the Middle East, with videos coming in from Jordan showing multiple of these missiles being scattered across the sky and intercepted by interceptor missiles, some of them potentially even intercepted before they could get there by the US Navy. Central Command called it exactly what it was. It was an attempted surprise attack. Every missile intercepted, nothing got through, not one American was scratched. And then America answered. Central Command and the Saudi Arabian Armed Forces conducted joint precision strikes across eastern Iraq against Iran-aligned militias that the IRGC had directed to attack American forces and Saudi energy infrastructure. It looks like American and Saudi fighter aircraft hit multiple terrorist logistics and weapon sites, and there's numbers behind this that are staggering. More than 30 IRGC-directed drone attacks in 72 hours, on top of more than 600 attempted attacks on Americans in Iraq between February and April alone. And now, let's talk about the hardware. It doesn't confirm that the A-10 was involved, but yeah, that photo is not so subtle of a nudge to the cardboard Ayatollah that they just got put on notice by a titanium bathtub. That's the A-10C. It has the GAU-8 Avenger. It has loiter time like nothing else in the inventory can match. And then the Royal Saudi Air Force, flying one of the most capable F-15E fleets on Earth, going into Iraq alongside the US, is just massive. And it's the F-15S and F-15SA. Extremely capable F-15S. We're gonna break down how the F-15 teams up with the A-10, how all these strikes went down, and then stay for the global roundup section, because something wild is going on with the US. And the UAE showing that this coalition in the Gulf with the US is coming together stronger than ever before. Also, President Zelensky visited the Oval Office and then stepped into Lockheed Martin right after. We're going to talk about all of that. That's about 3/4 of the way through the video. So, Iran felt all tough launching their ballistic missiles, but the real tough guy entered the scene and didn't have to say anything. They just had to say, "But." But Central Command put both statements out that we just talked about within hours of each other, and they need to be read so I can show you guys the sequence of how this all went down. So, at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time today, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps forces launched multiple ballistic missiles from Iran in an attempted surprise attack on US forces based in the Middle East. All Iranian missiles were successfully intercepted. US forces remained vigilant and at a high state of readiness. A US official also told the Jerusalem Post that at least 4 ballistic missiles came at American bases in Jordan, and they called it a major attack. And note what preceded it. Iranian negotiator Sayed Mohammad Mahandi had posted publicly, shortly before those missiles flew, that Iran was fully prepared for all-out war, and then the response came after they launched their missiles. And they also said that they would not negotiate about the Strait of Hormuz at all. That's another quote. So yeah, they're basically like, yeah, we'll negotiate, but we won't negotiate about the one thing that really matters. But it kind of seems like a little bit of gaslighting. But hey, we've never seen that before. And then after those ballistic missiles were swatted out of the sky by the US Navy, US Army, the interceptor crews that were doing what they do, striking those down, true heroes, really, going up and intercepting these, and the engineers who built the interceptor missiles, hats off. And then CENTCOM posted this. U.S. Central Command and Saudi Arabian armed forces conducted precision strikes in Iraq July 28th against Iran-aligned terrorists that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps directed to attack U.S. forces and Saudi infrastructure. U.S. and Saudi fighter attack aircraft struck multiple terrorist logistics and weapon sites across eastern Iraq in a strong response to over 30 IRGC-directed aerial drone attacks in the last 72 hours. The unwarranted attacks against U.S. forces were not successful. And then the warning in plain language. The IRGC and its terrorist proxies must cease these attacks to avoid further U.S. military response. Absolutely. Central Command didn't name the exact militias. They didn't disclose locations beyond eastern Iraq and released nothing on the damage yet. What it did release was the number that frames everything. From February through April, more than 600 attempted attacks on American citizens and facilities by Iran-aligned militias inside Iraq alone. 600. And on the Saudi side, Major General Turki al-Malki confirmed Saudi air defenses intercepted and destroyed multiple drones launching out of Iraqi territory at petroleum facilities in the eastern province near Riyadh. So, let us talk about the airplanes that Central Command decided to show you, and likely what Saudi Arabia brought as well. So, the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II, built in the 1970s for one job, destroying Soviet tank columns, pouring through the Fulda Gap. That company doesn't exist anymore. Soviet Union gone as well. But what's still here? The Warthog, and it's still flying. And this year, it's been one of the stars of this war. Let's start with the gun, because everything else is built literally around it. The GAU-8 Avenger is that 7-barrel, 30mm Gatling cannon firing roughly 3,900 rounds a minute. It is so large, the airframe was designed around the weapon instead of the other way around. And it sits slightly off-center, so the barrel actually firing lines up with the aircraft's center line. Around the pilot is a titanium armored tub, and the flight controls are redundant to the point that the airplane can come home with pieces missing, as we've seen it do already in this conflict. And the most valuable thing here that it does, maybe the least dramatic but amazing, is that it can loiter. Central Command said exactly that in its own post. The A-10 can loiter for hours, standing by and ready to execute a mission whenever needed. And that matters for this exact mission, because you're hunting militia logistics scattered across eastern Iraq. Not necessarily fixed installations with a runway and a control tower, but think compounds, sheds, Toyota Hiluxes. Yeah, if they see a whole bunch of Toyota Hiluxes, kind of calling a spade a spade. Anywhere that there's terrorists operating around the globe, there's going to be a fleet of Toyota Hiluxes, for sure. But then think about the parts that these teams use. Maybe mortars, different rounds that they use. And then obviously drones. So you don't solve that with necessarily only fast movers doing 500 knots in one pass. You solve it with something that gets overhead, stays overhead, sorts what it's looking at, and hits precisely what needs to be hit. I mean, both do the job incredibly well, because again, the F-15 from Saudi is highly capable, and then likely F-35S, F-16S, F-15Es. We don't know the exact fighters yet, But I love the foreshadowing that CENTCOM gave us with that picture of the A-10. And remember, during Operation Epic Fury, the original part of the war, General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told us at a Pentagon briefing that the A-10 is now in the fight across the southern flank, hunting Iranian fast attack craft in the Strait of Hormuz. And here's the kicker. This airplane was supposed to be gone. Congress, though, blocked the retirement, mandating 103 airframes through September. Then, on April 20th, the Secretary of the Air Force announced 3 squadrons would keep flying through 2030 to preserve combat power until the Defense Industrial Base ramps up aircraft production. So that's just amazing, knowing the A-10 will be around till 2030. The Warthog basically got to stay because it kept proving it was needed. And now, this is something you won't hear anywhere else, but I want to spend some time on it because it's probably going to get underreported. The Royal Saudi Air Force went into Iraq with the US. Saudi Arabia flies the F-15SA. That's the most advanced Eagle variant ever produced, along with the F-15EX with an AESA radar, fly-by-wire flight controls, and 2 more weapon stations than most F-15S have from the legacy fleet. They also fly Typhoons. They've been running combat operations over Yemen for decades. This wasn't a token contribution though, and it's not a partner that you would have to drag along. They're highly capable. I know some of these pilots myself, and I've seen the way that they operate in Riyadh. Like, these are high-level fighter pilots in coordination with Central Command, and they reserve the right to respond further at the time and place of their choosing because they're getting struck by these Iraqi militias. This is a professional military doing this by the book, and now they're right alongside, lockstep with the United States. Seeing a Gulf partner step up and have the backbone to unleash their fighter jets along with US fighters is just great to see. I mean, it's downright inspiring. Some people might say one of the challenging things might be deconfliction. 2 air forces, 2 command structures, 2 sets of rules of engagement, 2 radio cultures sharing the same airspace over a third country, Iraq, at night, against targets that move. Getting American and Saudi aircraft over eastern Iraq on the same night on separate target sets without anyone stepping on anyone. That takes years of exercises to make possible. And that relationship didn't just get built this week. It got built over decades. The US has teamed up with Saudi in different exercises for decades to get to the point where the relationships are incredibly good, and we're seeing that play out right now as they take on the evil empire of Iran together. But let's talk about Iran and the actual force posture that they have, because remember, they're not nothing, and you can't discount the enemy. So when it comes to what they actually have, you've seen on the live streams that we've done, they have multiple bunkers with hundreds of locations to store these ballistic missiles. So that's exactly what they used. And they didn't necessarily think that their proxy units would be targeted. So right now they're trying to show that they won't negotiate over the Strait of Hormuz at all. That's been their go-to talking point. And then they launched ballistic missiles during this tactical pause. But now, it looks like the US military has, in no uncertain terms, said that this ceasefire is over while they're eliminating these proxy networks in Iraq. But I love what CENTCOM said. They stripped it all the way down in one sentence. They said, Iran-aligned terrorists that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps directed, not affiliated, not aligned with, directed. And then Saudi Arabia, a country that has spent this entire war trying not to necessarily get pulled in towards Iran. We know they've been fighting against the Houthis, now puts fighters over Iraq. So, Tehran didn't just lose a warehouse. They basically now have a coalition that's starting to ramp up against them, and this is a massive development in the conflict. You made it to the Global Roundup section, my friends. So, here's what's going on. America is building the future with the UAE. U.S. Central Command announced today that the United States and the United Arab Emirates are standing up the first bilateral military artificial intelligence task force in history. It's called Task Force Talent Synapse. Roughly 20 American and Emirati specialists in AI, data, cybersecurity, all combining because this is a wild fact. The UAE had over 1,600 Iranian drones shot at it so far. And they've collected all that data to give them the ability to create AI targeting, AI detection, lots of things to counter Iran's drone swarms. And that just comes from experience. And the fact that the UAE is now teaming up with the US is a great sign. And then also, a couple different presidents visited the White House just yesterday. That was Bibi Netanyahu from Israel and Zelensky from Ukraine. So Bibi Netanyahu said it was one of the most productive meetings that he's had with any US president. So we'll see how that plays out. What that means. Does Israel get more involved? Is Israel going to sit on the sidelines for a second and let the coalition of Gulf partners kind of take over for a while? And then with Zelensky going in, here's the kicker to this. After the meeting with President Trump, he was said to have met with CEOs of Lockheed Martin, but he wasn't asking for missiles. He was asking for the license to build them, which has been pre-approved through the Trump administration from the reports that we've seen. So that means more ability to counter Russia with the Patriot Interceptor missile. You made it to the 4D chess strategic analysis section, my friends. So here's what's going on with that. A-10 Warthog, potentially the one going in could be F-15ES, F-15SAs from Saudi Arabia. Obviously, the ceasefire right here has basically completely been turned off. So what's going to happen from this point could continue to be a tit for tat. But it looks like Iran might be begging for more bombs. We know that 20% of the targets in Iran haven't been hit yet. They've been left. So it looks like, unfortunately, Iran is choosing the hard path, and they're basically driving themselves right towards a condition where the US, Saudi Arabia, UAE might have to start targeting more infrastructure like bridges and power plants. Hopefully, the free people of Iran can get armed one of these days soon. That would be incredible. If they could get armed, drop 100,038 specials. You guys heard me say that before, but give them the ability to threaten the IRGC with handguns. They don't need long guns. Threaten them with handguns. So then the IRGC has to think every time they go into someone's house to try to rip them out of their home. They have to know that there's a chance that they get smoked. And who knows, that could be the thing that pushes this conflict into something where now the A-10 Warthog, F-15E, F-15SA could be flying close air support with military advisors and other air assets to help support the free people of Iran take their country back. Now, I know that's not an easy thing to do. I know that's a big ask. So we'll see how that plays out. It's so great to see this happening, with the proxies finally being put on notice that you're just an arm, you're a tentacle of the IRGC.